Hey everybody, and welcome to our next episode of the History of Video Gaming. I'm Wes, and here with me, as always, is Ben. How's it going, Ben?
It's going well. How are you, Wes?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a bit of a long time for us. Hopefully, no time for the listeners at home, but getting back into the swing of this recording jazz.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So let's start off with what kind of stuff you've been playing recently.
Well, as you mentioned, we've had 2 weeks off, and I've kind of been all over the place, honestly. The past 2 weeks. I think what has ended up happening was I've been playing a lot of RuneScape again. Still kind of like messing with my multiple accounts.
Right.
But I don't know if like the quick like TLDR is like I had an account, it got banned. I had a second account, he died. I had a third account. I was playing the second and third accounts at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately I was like, well, which account am I going to go far in here? It's the one that hasn't died. So I really like focused on that guy. I've been playing him pretty hard. And I finally, just this past Friday, just got him basically to the point where my first guy died. So I'm basically back where I was. It's only taken like a couple months, but
Right.
We're back there, and yeah, it's going pretty well. I'm starting to do like the fun things again, like build a house and do a bunch of quests. You know, I'm no longer limited by only being combat level 20 or whatever. So
Right, good. You're not just grinding, mining for all your levels or whatever it was.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of mining because I wanted to make my own armor.
Yeah.
Because I could go and buy it, but I think part of the enjoyment of Iron Man is like you're completely self-sufficient. So that's what I was doing. And the hardest part, the part that I was most worried about was there's a quest called the Waterfall Quest. I don't know if I mentioned this when I was talking about RuneScape before, but
I don't think so, no.
Basically it gives you like a lot of combat experience if you can complete the quest. So if you do it, you immediately go up like 10 levels, which is pretty nice. However, in the quest, you have to run past these like level 80 something giants and they can basically two-shot you.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so it's pretty dangerous. But luckily they're in areas where you can only be aggroed by one enemy at a time. So if you aggro someone lower level, like a level 25 skeleton or something, hopefully you can run past the giant and he won't attack you because it still thinks the skeleton's attacking you. So you have to kind of like, mess with the NPC tracking in order to do it safely.
Weird, okay.
Yeah, I was able to do it. I actually had to do it twice because I got to the end and I realized I had like the wrong combination of ingredients I needed to make this thing work. As soon as I did it the first time, I didn't get hit at all. And I was like, well, I could probably do it a second time. And
nice.
I was. And then after that time, I had to wait for like 15 minutes to use my teleport out because I was like, I'm not going to risk it and run back. So I was just sitting there for a while. But
Worth it to make sure your hard-earned stuff doesn't go to waste.
Yep. And from then, I was able to like enjoy some of the more fun things that I didn't want to have to do in case he died and I would have had to just do all that over again.
Right.
So been doing some agility courses, some thieving, some quest stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been fun. What have you been up to, Wes?
Well, I actually past 2 weeks, reason we hadn't recorded is I did 8 performances of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying.
Oh yeah,
it's a hilarious musical for those of you who don't know it. Also like blatant like satire of 50s businessman in the workplace kind of thing. So it's pretty good and still relevant today with how much of a satire it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so did that, but somehow still found a decent bit of time to be gaming while I was doing that, and picked up a new game called Risk of Rain 2, which is really fun.
Did you play the first one?
I didn't. I was thinking about buying it because it was cheaper, but they changed it from like a 2D side scroller to a 3D game for the second one.
Oh.
And the
cool.
3D aspect of it and the I think there was a multiplayer in both, but the multiplayer in the second one specifically I thought looked pretty cool. So I picked up that one because me and my friend were looking for something new to play. And it's real good. It's like a roguelike where you just do like semi-randomly generated runs of the same stuff over and over again, and you get a bunch of items that make you stronger, and like certain combinations let you do certain things. And I think it loops forever. I've only ever like looped through the series of levels one time, and it started getting really hard for me.
Wow.
But I think you can just like keep going. It's kind of crazy. It just keeps scaling, and stuff gets way more ridiculous.
So how is it with the 3D? Is that like is it like a brawling kind of game? How does the action work?
I'm trying to think of what a good way to describe it would be. I mean, it's like over the shoulder. It's not first person.
Is it like
so you can see
Dynasty
your
Warriors?
character. A little bit, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
enemies are a little bit tougher. You have like 4 abilities, almost as if it was like a MOBA or something, where you have like your QWER skills.
Mm-hmm.
One's like a movement skill, one's your just regular fire, and then a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, but then you get stuff that's like adds bleed damage. So then like you can scale, so you actually do bleed damage to people, and it does stuff like that, critical hits, and there's a bunch of crazy interactions. So it's pretty good. It's still in development, seemingly very slowly, but the company behind it seems cool. So I'm totally all right with supporting early access in that sense.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I remember the first one getting like really good reviews. So
yeah, I think people really loved it. I think that was kind of like a hardcore roguelike kind of thing too. I don't think the core of the game changed too much between both of them.
Nice. Well, that sounds fun.
Yeah, so I've been having a good time with that, and still chipping away at the gigantic Blightfall mod that we're playing for Minecraft, but that's going to take a long time, I think.
Yeah.
The goal is to like purify this whole area, and it's quite a task.
You've been playing a lot of Pokemon Go recently?
I have been. They've been doing a lot of good events for the summer.
I imagine like with all your traveling, probably.
Yeah, going to and from the play. A couple of people in the play who still play Pokemon Go as well, so I was doing stuff with them. And there's actually a big event today that after recording I'm probably gonna take part in.
Oh yeah, I saw I was leaving my work one day pretty late, maybe like 9-10 p.m. and there were these 2 people walking their dogs with their phones out, like staring at them. I'm like, oh, I see ya. You're coming here for the gym, aren't you?
Yeah. There's still that dedicated community out there playing Pokemon Go.
Yeah, at like midnight apparently, or whatever it was.
That's crazy.
It was definitely dark out, but I guess they had their dogs in case.
Yeah, they're walking their dogs anyway, but still, that's a lot of dedication to playing Pokemon.
Oh yeah. You want to move into our special topic?
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
So
yeah, if you want to introduce it.
Yeah, I'll introduce it. So for this week, we're going to be talking about the history of Ramtech and also a little bit of the history of Exidy, which is kind of like a spin-off company almost. I don't know. I'll let you talk about it more, Wes, but why don't you get into it for the people?
Yeah, sounds good. And to start off, I just wanted to say a lot of the information we got from this, if not all of it, is from a blog. The guy's called The Golden Age Arcade Historian. I think his name is Keith Smith, and the site's also called All in Color for a Quarter, I think.
Yeah.
And it's just a really comprehensive look at both of these companies. A lot of like quotes from interviews and a ton of stuff. So please go check that out, because that's really the source material that we were using for this.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Credit where credit is due. And this guy did a lot of stuff for this.
Oh, yeah.
But to start off, we're going to be talking about Ramtech. This was founded by Chuck and Mel McEwen and a couple other aerospace engineers, and it was actually originally funded by Exxon, the same company that owns all the gas stations now, as well as a bunch of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, at least. But it was spelled with the 2 X's, so I figure. And they originally started off not as a video game company, but they were just making graphical displays, I think, for use in medical fields and also for use in different aerospace fields. Not sure exactly how. But after Pong came out, a couple of the employees saw that and they realized that this could be a lucrative market. So they expanded into making video games. And the first things they started off with were a lot of fairly notable Pong clones that we covered, like volley, hockey, and soccer. But after that, they kind of expanded to Clean Sweep, which I talked about in the last episode. That was made by Hal Ivey, and it's one of the ones where you start at the bottom with the paddle and the ball still bouncing up, and you have to clear everything off the screen, sort of like the I forget what the name is, but it's like the Brick Breaker one that
Breakout.
Breakout, yes, that Atari would come out with in I think a year or a couple months.
Yeah, which is also Clean Sweep. I want to say is like one of the most original games they made up until that time.
Yeah, and that's why it was one of the big bullet points I had on here, because before that it was just basically Pong clones and everything that the rest of the industry was doing. But Clean Sweep was really the first that notable one, at least, or the first that we saw that took that spin on it to say, okay, now there's only one paddle and a ball, and you have to get everything off the screen to make it sort of like a score-based kind of game instead.
Mm-hmm.
And Hal Ivey will continue to be important as we go through this history. He also helped to make Wipeout. And towards the end of 1974, Ramtech was actually doing pretty well in the video game market, and they were looking to expand and separate their video game and other production arms to make them their own companies. But then, fast forward to 1976, and like seemed to be happening to all video game companies in Sunnyvale, California at the time, their manufacturing plant caught on fire.
Why does this keep happening?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't see any hints at a serial arsonist going around burning down video game places. Who knows? Maybe it's just because it's in California and there were brush fires. No idea.
Maybe it's like a lot of these companies kind of started, like, I feel like they built a manufacturing process really quickly and expanded a lot in a short amount of time. So maybe like
that's true.
They just moved a little too fast.
That could be, and that's pretty feasible. I mean, this industry was like expanding so quickly, and everyone's like, oh shoot, we got to grow. This is really popular. We have to meet manufacturing demands. So who knows if the construction and safety standards were up to par with what they should have been.
Yeah.
But after that fire, they actually still had enough funding from a lot of their backers that they remained in business and continued making games. They didn't really produce anything too notable or that we're going to get into right now. And in 1978, they weren't seeing profit that they wanted off of video games, so they actually moved over to start making electromechanical arcade games instead. And there's a couple different ones that sound like some things that we've seen before. The one that caught my eye was called Dark Invader, and the player would look through the scope of a gun, and there were UV light painted pieces of wire that spun around really fast so that they looked like UFOs.
Cool.
And I guess they glowed under the UV light because they had fluorescent paint on them. And it sounds like it could be neat. Also, like, it could really mess with your eyes, but you would just kind of shoot those down. And one of the other notable successful ones they made was a kind of skee ball variant called Boom Ball, where you shot the balls out of a cannon.
Oh, yeah.
Which seems like an intense version of skee ball that I definitely want to play.
Oh, yeah.
But after making all these electromechanical games, they weren't really seeing too much profit from that either. And they sold their games division off to one of the founders, Mel McEwen, in 1979, I believe. And after that, Ramtech kind of fades off into the distance as far as video game history. They had a couple more important things throughout. But one of their biggest contributions ended up being two of their former employees who went on to work at Exidy. So Pete Kaufman worked at Ramtech until 1973, and then he shortly after that founded Exidy, which I think this is hilarious, is short for Excellence in Dynamics. Something I feel like you don't really see that much now, where it's like you have this catchy name, but it's short for we are excellent at doing what we do.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been where they could have went with Syzygy or whatever Atari's was. That's
true. Yes, Syzygy, that horrible, like messes with your tongue just saying it. I feel like, thank goodness it's Atari. And one thing I noticed as I was going through the history of Exidy and Ramtech and all the other companies is that you happen to see a lot of names kind of jump up through all these different companies. And it's crazy how many of them were just located right in Sunnyvale, California, which is considered part of like Silicon Valley and all that.
Yeah.
And that's just where a lot of these early innovations in the 70s were happening, and where the business was and where everyone was starting their companies up. And Exidy didn't really early on do too much to distinguish himself. They started off with a lot of Pong clones, which we, I think, either have covered or will be covering in the future.
In today's episode, actually.
In today's episode. All right. Well, there we go. and some other real interesting games that we're going to be covering in the future, so I won't get into them too much. They had a Demolition Derby racing game come out in 1975 called Destruction Derby. And after they kind of sold the rights for that, they modified it into Death Race, which is where you run down little gremlins on the screen to get points for it.
My kind of game.
Yeah. It sounds real intense. And they didn't have them turn into dead bodies because they thought that was too gruesome. So they just turned into little crosses on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to go too much further into the Exidy history after that. A lot of those games we're going to be talking about later, and we'll bring up some of their history then. But Death Race is notable because it started a huge controversy. There was an article that went out about how horrible this game is, and I'm sure something about corrupting children and all that, but it actually ended up boosting the sales for Death Race quite a bit.
I feel like that's what normally happens.
It is, yeah. I mean, people start this argument and the kids are like, well, man, I want that game now.
Yeah. I think, one of the most interesting things about this whole thing is Ramtech kind of started with the Pawn clones. Their first original game was by who again?
Howell Ivey, I think.
Howell Ivey, and then he leaves for Exidy, right?
Yeah,
At one point. And after he leaves, Ramtech starts declining. And I don't think it was just him, but it seems like Ramtech kind of lost those people who made some of the only original Ramtech games. And then
a lot of their creative force, I guess, kind of started leaving and going on to do Exidy. Pete Kaufman left a lot earlier, but Hal Ivey and I'm sure a bunch of others definitely hurt them. Yeah,
so I think it's it really shows how Ramtech, even though we've seen them fairly often up until this point, as soon as they lose their people, it's over for them. And I feel like that's a trend that we've seen before and we'll see again.
Yeah, I'm sure that will start popping up more too as we go, where people start jumping ship to the ones that are really making it in the industry.
Yeah, it's also weird because I feel like at this time period, single individuals make more of an impact than a development team like we would see nowadays. It just feels like the machines at the time, only a couple people really knew how to make video games with the discrete logic parts or whatever it was, and so they were the forerunners of this area. But nowadays, we talk about games more in terms of development teams, like the team at Blizzard or the team at whatever. So
right,
I think that's kind of interesting as well. Although we do still have some single people like Kojima, for instance, that will pop up from time to time.
Right, yeah, where you a series of games or a whole, not related, but spiritual successors are oh yeah, that's that guy's game or that girl's game that's really making a huge impact.
The Star Citizen guy is another one I think of.
Yeah, Chris Roberts and well, I was gonna say the name of the guy who made the Elite Dangerous series, Edward Braben, something like that, but
doesn't matter.
The idea of that, we're here we don't really have, you didn't really go to school to be a game developer. It's all these aerospace engineers who are hey, look, I can make games. And now it's just totally different, where it's people are looking for a job in this instead of a field where you're hey, there might be some money in this.
Right. Yeah, and it seems like most of the games nowadays, if they're really good, it's usually because they've had time to be good and not just rush it out. I don't know, maybe that's just my own experience, whereas in this case it seems more, the talent of the person who made it is determining how good it is to some degree.
Right. And also the field's so new that if you implement it well, whoever gets a well-implemented form of an idea out the fastest is the most popular, because nobody's ever seen it before.
Right.
Whereas now you got to spend a lot of time thinking, how do I make this unique? How do I make it well implemented? Because a lot of stuff's been done before.
Yeah. So you have to put babies down your throat or whatever whatever Kojima's new game is.
Right. Yeah. Death Stranding. Yeah, I've watched some videos and I'm still confused. I'm hey, look, it's the guy from Walking Dead, but
yeah.
Who knows? I'll take a look at it because it looks interesting, but I don't know if I'll buy that one.
I'm sure it'll be good. I just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, babies down your throat. Exactly. I had no idea where you were going with that when you first started talking. I was what the hell game is he referencing?
Yeah. I think with that, are you ready to go into timeline, Wes?
Yeah, let's get right into it.
All right, meet you back in a flash. That was so bad.
Meet you back in a flash.
Welcome back from that beautiful musical interlude we just heard. Isn't that right, Wes?
Wasn't that amazing? Fantastic.
Props to whoever did that. I don't know.
Don't know who it could be, but yeah, they did a great job.
So our first game for today, which by the way, I think I'm going to name today's episode the Lame Duck episode, because we just could not find any games during this period, which is like the summer of 74. So we're going to be covering a lot of games. But don't worry, because Wes and I are only going to rate one each. So we've got a little bit more time to go over a lot more games, even though they're all just honorable mentions. Right. And you'll see why. They're not good. So first we have some spring and summer ports of popular games. So we've got Coupe du Monde, which was a port of World Cup football for France by Atari. We also have TV Basketball by Midway, which is a port of the Tatio Basketball. And we have Flip Out by Volley, which was a clean of Ramtech's Clean Sweep. Did I say clean twice? A clone of Ramtech.
You said a clean of Clean Sweep, but yeah.
I've got sweeps on the mind.
And I just wanted to say, to flex my very limited French, Coup du Monde means World Cup in French. So I think that's why it's a clone of World Cup.
I didn't know you were a worldly person, Wes.
Yeah, I know how to say World Cup in French, and I think that's probably about it. I think bottle is bouteille. That's about all I got for you.
Well, I'm glad you know the things that matter.
But next we have the one that I actually went through and rated. And this one is great just because it's called Flim-Flam.
Oh, yeah. It seems like a very old term, you know? We know it's an old game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, fiddlesticks. Oh, freaking Flim-Flam. You know, you just got to throw that in there every now and then. And the reason it got that name is, as I will get into as I'm going through it, is it has their, I believe they phrased it as like their trademark Flim-Flam button.
Oh, yeah.
Which affects the gameplay. But this came out in 1974. I think in the summer, but we're not sure exactly when in 74 it came out. And this one, all we really had was a couple of videos of people playing the original cabinets and a flyer of when the cocktail table cabinet for this released. So I didn't get to play this one, but I did get to take a look at it and see some of the information behind it. It was created by Meadows Games, I think is what the company's called. And this was another one that was based out of Sunnyvale, California.
Yep.
And one thing I thought was hilarious as I was reading through the flyer for the cocktail table cabinet is like all this language that they use to describe how, like, you know, there's arcade cabinets, but if you're looking for something high class, you go for this cocktail table. They said the walnut wood and simulated leather makes it suited for plusher locations like airports, restaurants, and hotel lounges. And the illustration's just great. People in like 70s, like crazy, colorful bell-bottom pants and suits drinking martinis on top of this Flim-Flam board. But some of the innovations of this one that kind of differentiated, for the most part, it was a Pong clone. The graphics and everything else were just straight up Pong, but it had different sizes for the paddle, and they implemented this in the way of difficulty settings where it was either novice for largest paddle, expert, or pro for the smallest paddle. And it was also interesting that this one could be either 2 or 4 players, depending on how many quarters you put in. And you used a joystick to control it, whereas a lot of them, I think, had, at this time, some of them had joysticks, but some of them had knobs and sort of buttons for their controls.
Yeah. And dials, like, too.
Yeah, I think the dials is what I'm thinking of. A lot of them use that for moving around, sort of similar to the like crazy Magnavox controllers that they originally had.
Yeah.
This one had joysticks, and your paddle could move anywhere within your side of the screen. As far as I could tell from the videos, it couldn't cross over to the other side, Magnavox style. So that's a nice improvement there. Yeah. But yeah, it is interesting too, because it allows you to play a bit more and a little bit more like actual tennis, since you can move back and forth on the screen and not just up and down. And the 4-player mode was interesting because it's not a 4-player versus, but it's a team 2v2. It's the left side of the screen versus the right side of the screen. And the only part where you can score is like traditional Pong, where it's still just the left and right of the screen. The top and bottom are still solid, and the ball bounces off of there. But getting into what the Flim-Flam button was, or the speed button, I'm not sure if there was different versions. The one I was looking at was the speed button, but in the flyer they advertised it as the Flim-Flam button. Each player had it under their joystick, and when you pressed it, it changed the speed and the angle of the ball while it was in motion.
Nice.
Which, yeah, it seems like a interesting way to kind of change things up, and just, it's sort of like adding the English in the Magnavox, where you can just randomly affect the ball and have it totally mess with the other player. Mm-hmm. And another interesting thing I noticed as I went through this is that the noises and sounds on the cabinets that I was watching, I think, are literally exactly the same as Pong. I don't know if it was all the same hardware that made the sound, or if they, because I don't know if they programmed them, or if it was more of an electrical. Well, no, it was a digital sound, but either way, not sure how it happened, but it's the exact same thing.
Let's listen to a clip of that, because I don't think we're gonna have any more sound in this episode. So let's listen to this one.
Let's go for it. And that's pretty much all I had for the background on this game, so I'm going to get straight into the ratings that I had for it. For graphics, I gave it a 1 out of 10. It's literally the same thing as Pong. The scores on the screen, the 4-player quadrant is a little bit different, but all it does is adds a horizontal version of the vertical line that's already on the screen. For sound, I gave it a 1 out of 10. Same thing. It's the exact same bounce and score noises that you just heard as tons of other games before it. But for gameplay, I did rate it a little bit higher and gave it a 3 out of 10. While it is just sort of a Pong or elimination style clone, more towards the Pong side of it, it's nice that it allows you to have a lot more control over your paddles with the joystick. It's an interesting control scheme and different from some of the other versions like we were talking about. And you can move anywhere on the screen, so it gives you a lot more options. And also having the 2v2 4-player mode, which I don't think we've seen a lot either, is a nice spin on how traditional Pong could be played.
So when you say 2v2, it's like, if I remember right, it's like 2 games of 1v1, right?
I wasn't sure when I originally looked at it, because on the cabinet, there's just 2 scores at the top. Originally, I thought it was like a 4-person game where each person had a score. Mm-hmm. But I think it's like you share the same scoring zone with the person who's on your side. So it's like a regular 2v2, I think.
But you just can't cross or whatever.
Yeah, you can't cross into their section. Okay. But as far as I could tell, like, if it landed in either the top or the bottom of the left side of the screen, the right side got a point.
I gotcha.
And other than that, for gameplay, I thought the Flim-Flam button seemed kind of cool, but I could see it either being really fun or incredibly frustrating. That, like, as soon as they push it, it just changes speed and angle, and you can't really block it.
Could you push it, like, all the time? Do you know?
I couldn't tell what the boundaries were on that. I want to say it was just after you've hit it, but I don't know, like, how smart that game was.
Yeah.
It seemed like it was more like a little bit less than Magnavox, where you could just do it like at literally any time. Mm-hmm. But I'm not positive about that, because I only ever saw in the videos someone use that button after they had hit it.
Right.
But it was on the opponent's side of the screen, so that didn't seem to be a barrier to it. Maybe it just involves like what direction it's going or something like that, based on what team can hit it. Mm-hmm. If you could hit it all the time, that would definitely take away from it being a useful tool, I think.
Yeah, well, I also wonder if it was smart enough to like only let you hit, like, use the button once, in a point or something, or if you could just always hit it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't see it mentioned anywhere, and I don't know if that's just because there's not a lot of notes about this game or what. I would figure that you could probably just like hit it within a certain span of time, regardless of point. But we don't really have the information on that, so I'm not positive exactly how that worked.
I mean, it's a Flim-Flam button. What do you? There's not
What
a
more
lot
do you
of
need to know,
information
right?
on that yet.
Yeah. And the game cabinet doesn't even seem to call it the Flim-Flam button, even though the flyer does. So
Yeah.
who knows?
The flyer is
but
all
other
we
than
need.
yeah, I know it had a. It's hilarious the tone that they have for trying to sell this cocktail table.
Yeah.
But other than that, for gameplay, those things were cool innovations, but not that much that was too different from a ball and paddle game. So 3 out of 10 is what I settled on for that. For relevance, I gave it a 2 out of 10. It's a neat game, but just another in a very long line of ball and paddle games. Doesn't seem like it's very influential, if nothing else, just by the fact that pretty much all we could find on it was 2 like pretty decent YouTube videos of the cabinet being played and the flyer. And there wasn't really much else information out there.
Yeah.
So for overall, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10 rating. It looked like a fun game, and I think, if I had the opportunity to play it on the cabinet with 3 other friends, it'd probably be pretty cool. But when you're going back and wanting to play a ball and paddle game today, I think you definitely want to play something that has a little bit more name recognition. Like, you don't get together and be like, oh, you guys know Flim-Flam, right? Like, let's go play around. So decent overall, but not a super exciting game from my perspective.
I hope someone's keeping track of all the times we need to make t-shirts, because that's another great t-shirt. Hey, do you want to play Flim-Flam?
Yeah, hey, do you want to play Flim-Flam? On the back says put some English on it, right?
Yeah, put some English. There was a third one. I forget what it was.
Oh, we'll have to see. Someone out there's keeping track.
Yeah, someone. I think. I mean, how are you feeling with Flim-Flam, Wes? The best game this episode for you, probably, because
yeah, well,
it's the only one you rated.
Best one so far. Best one I rated. Yeah, I mean, so it's a real star today.
Yeah. So moving on from Flim-Flam, we've got TV Goalie, which is by Chicago Coin. I'm like fairly certain they already made this game, but basically this is a Odyssey table tennis variant, kind of like Flim-Flam. But the cool thing about this game is they built this crazy cabinet for it, where the TV was like face up, like it was on a cocktail table, but then you also had these walls built around it that had like an actual stadium made out of plastic and like all painted up really nicely.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so you got your head put into this actual stadium kind of thing as you look down and play this game, which is kind of interesting and cool. The cabinet is definitely worth checking out. It's very artistic. So yeah, it's kind of like, I feel like the cabinet was the selling point of this, not the actual game, which is just table tennis. There is a couple different things. The ball wouldn't ricochet off the sides. It would only like respawn in the middle if it went off the side. So I imagine scoring would be a lot harder, because every time it goes off the north or south sides, it just would respawn in the middle.
Weird. I guess to try to make it a little bit more like soccer.
Yeah. And then it also kept score, which is nice. And they also added some advanced sound clips, which I guess imitated like crowd noises. So that's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think that might have been on its own system. So not necessarily part of the video game aspect, but more part of the exterior cabinet. But
gotcha.
It might have been, kind of like a video game electromechanical hybrid in a sense. So yeah, it was very, very cool, interesting. Unfortunately, there's no emulation. I think there is maybe video. There's definitely flyers, because of course. So we couldn't play this one. So unfortunately, it's just an honorable mention.
And then on to the next honorable mention we have, Thumper Bumper / Hockey Tennis. I think there's a debate about what the official name of this one was. It was maybe it was released by Exidy, and I think they had called it Hockey Tennis, but the actual name was Thumper Bumper.
Yeah, I think like in interviews, the developers were like, "Oh, you're talking about Thumper Bumper, right?"
Yeah. And this is one of the ones that I kind of just breezed over when I was saying Exidy, when they first started, basically made Pong clones.
Yeah.
And so this is one of them. It's a Pong with a cellophane overlay, just when we thought Magnavox had proven that wasn't a great idea. And, so it makes you think you're playing a color game, even if you aren't. But this one, there's not really much info on, other than that it was one of the first games made by Exidy.
Yeah. I do think the cellophane overlays are a little different because the light shining through will change color. So
that's true. Whereas the other ones were, I don't know if it was a harder plastic or if some of the backgrounds were just opaque or what, but
for the Odyssey ones, it was definitely like a white square. It's like shining in the middle of this guy's chest or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And so moving on from our first Exidy entry into the timeline, we have Button, which is the game I was able to play and rate. This is a People's Computer Company computer game made by Dave Kaufman, which is really confusing because the Exidy guy was, what was his name, Wes?
Pete Kaufman.
And
but there's two F's in that Kaufman, so I guess you gotta hold it out a little longer just so we can differentiate.
I know. So Pete Kaufman and then Dave Kaufman, who is the computer guy. I think we probably already talked about him because he's known for making Star Trader, which you've played, Wes.
Oh, yeah. And that was a good one.
So this is like, I don't know if it's actually a sequel or not, because I read he developed it in 1973 and it didn't come out till May of 1974. So he might have been doing both at the same time, I'm not sure, but this was released in the People's Computer Company newsletter, along with a couple other games that we'll get into. But the purpose of this game is basically there's a circle of people, like 6 or 7 people, sitting in a circle, and one of them has a button. And at the end of every game turn, they can pass it to the person on their left or right. So if they're like person number 3, they can pass it to 4 or 5. And you have to try to guess who it is. And the thing is, if you guess somebody, they might say, like, my neighbor has it. Or they might say, I had it last turn. So based off these clues, you kind of have to predict where the button has went or where it's going, and then make a decision. So a good example might be you guess person number 3. They say, my neighbor has it. 2 had it, but he passed it. So it's either in number 1 or number 3's hands. At that point, you've got like a 50-50. Maybe you guess wrong, and that results in a couple more game turns where you're trying to narrow it down because they could have kept it, they could have passed it. So, by the way, it tells you if somebody has kept the button and they didn't pass it. So,
okay, so you know that it hasn't moved, and you can narrow down which person you thought it was originally.
Yeah, which is really helpful, especially at the beginning, because usually if your guess is really off, they won't pass it. So, if you know number 5 has it or number 1 has it, you can guess 5, and chances are number 1 will just keep it, and then you can guess them and win. So,
weird.
Yeah. So it's a guessing game. I wouldn't say it's particularly interesting, honestly, because a lot of the times the same kind of things will come up, like that 5 and 1 scenario where, like, as long as you're being somewhat smart about it, you're kind of inevitably going to win in a turn or 2.
Right.
So I don't think there was that much challenge here, but overall, I gave the gameplay a 1.5 out of 10. It's not that great. There's, even though it's kind of random, the situations that come up feel like they come up over and over again. I think it's just based on the game's rules about whether or not the person keeps a button. If you make a far away guess, because you can kind of like guess people far away and lock in on who has the button. So,
right, you can kind of game it a bit so that you know how the computer's going to make their turn based on what you did and sort of just narrow it down.
Yeah, because at some point, you're basically always going to be left with a 50-50 of, I know who had it last time. They pass it to the right or the left. So immediately half the time there, you're going to win. And then even if you lose there, it's only another couple guesses until you have that choice again. So
weird. Is there a lose condition at all?
Not that I found. I mean, there might be after a certain number of guesses you lose.
Like an upper turn limit, yeah, or guess. Okay.
Yeah, but as far as I know, you can keep guessing until you I guess we're frustrated and wanted to quit yourself. And there were times when I was like, especially at the beginning, you're like 5, nope, 4, nope, 3, nope. Like, You would just keep
Right.
going through until someone was like, "Oh, my neighbor has it," and you're like, "Okay, well, I guess it'll start now." So yeah, it's not. I mean, it seems like Dave Kaufman was pretty busy with Star Trader, so he probably just made this as like a test run or something, and eventually had it published in a newsletter. But
Right, like a proof of concept kind of thing. A lot of the computer games at this time seemed like, hey, look, a computer can do this.
yeah, so and a lot of the People's Computing Company games were very mathematical and a lot of number guessing games and stuff like that. So this fits right in with their usual type of game.
Right.
But, it did have a little bit of a unique spin on it because instead of dealing with just pure numbers, you're kind of imagining the circle. It did have like an ASCII circle kind of thing with numbers on it. So you could see who was sitting beside each other, which was basically 1 to 7, and then it loops. So
Okay, so it did never change. Yeah.
No, it
I
never
guess that would just
changed.
be overly confusing for not much reason.
Yeah. But, I thought it was a bit of an interesting spin on it. But still, gameplay, 1.5 out of 10. Graphics, I gave 1.5 out of 10 as well, just because of that circle that it included, which I thought was a nice addition. But otherwise, you're just guessing numbers. So, and then it's like, sometimes the texts are a little funny, like if you guess the wrong person and it's not even close, they'll be like, why would it be me? Like, I guess you don't have it then. Okay.
Those computer people love their sarcasm with all the
Yeah.
Wumpus games and everything else. There's some good text in there.
Yeah. There was no sound, so 0 sound. And for relevance, I gave it a 2 out of 10. I don't think it's very relevant at all. I think, the only thing that makes this game like more special than any of the number guessing games is that it's by Dave Kaufman. And I tried to look up a fair amount about him, but it seems like his most crowning achievement is Star Trader. So you don't see him later in the years to come. I think he does a couple more People's Computer Company games and like other basic, almost mini game type games, but I kind of was hoping for something a little bit bigger from him.
Right. Yeah.
But, he made Star Trader. That's good.
There you go.
Overall, I gave the game 1.25 out of 10.
Really nitpicking there.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it's okay. It wasn't great. I feel like that's part of the lame duck episode.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's, what do you think? The best game you reviewed today?
Oh, well, I think by elimination it is, yeah. Not because I want it to be.
By being last man standing or only man standing.
We actually have some nice games coming up here, but we just couldn't
Honorable
play
mentions,
them.
yeah. We do have some pretty
so
good ones.
Why don't you get us into some more honorable mentions here, Wes?
Sure. And this is probably a bad example of ones that we wish we could play, but this is a base or a base. I'm not sure on the pronunciation. People's Computer Company is where it was first released, and it's by Peter Katz, and this was in May of 1974. Same edition as the Dave Kaufman one, I'm guessing.
Yep.
And this, you just pick a base, as in like mathematical, like we do normal math in base 10, but then there's also base 8, base 2, base whatever, and you guess what number the computer's picked from the base, and it says either you're high, you're low, or that's not a number that's in this base.
Which is probably what I would get if we tried.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, do you know math? I'm like, not that kind of math. Jeez. And I think that's basically it. Just kind of a number guessing game. I'm guessing there wasn't really much of an interface on this. Just sort of like, hey, pick that. I think one of the versions we were looking up showed that it might be crocodiles teaching you how to do math.
Yeah, on the like little the page in the newsletter, it had a bunch of crocodiles, which
for the art.
Yeah, that's
like
not
work that into the game.
Though.
No, yeah, if they work into the game, it's like, oh, hey, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And so the next one I had is 2 games: Formula K by Key Games and Track 10 by Atari, which, just our constant reminder, these are basically the same company, just publishing the same thing to make more money.
Yep.
And these were both in sometime in 74. They were just clones of Grand Track 10 with different tracks, but they did make the addition of an oil slick, which definitely through all early games and even common or some current racing games, that's just like a staple of like, watch out for this random oil slick on the track.
Oh yeah, Mario Kart. I see you.
Exactly. Yeah. Or like pole position and other ones like that.
Yeah.
And after that, we have Wham Bam 2 by PMC in 74. This was a Pong doubles version of the original Wham Bam. Still the same thing, where it was a split color screen where one half of it's blue and one half green.
At least they didn't use cellophane for that one. There's true color, which was nice.
There's actual color there, yeah.
Yeah. The next game, which is one I reviewed, is called Astro Hockey by Brunswick. And I really kind of wanted to play this. I tried really hard to find a way to play this or even a video of it, but there's just nothing. There's just a flyer. That's all we have. So basically what it is and why I wanted to play it is it's a version of Pong, surprise. But on this one, once the ball passes the center line, it immediately like changes course and direction, and it can even change speed. So I feel like the game would be incredibly difficult to play because you try to anticipate where the ball is going, and then halfway when it comes to you, it just immediately, turns.
Right.
But I think
hit it and then good luck.
Yeah, I think if you're a great Pong player, it would be like the perfect game to just school people on, right? Because you'd be like ready for the extra challenge. So I was kind of curious to know how much of it would be a fun challenge and how much of it would be just impossible. I feel like it would be a little of both. So it's unfortunate I couldn't play that one. But yeah, that came out in sometime in 74, by the way. And then the next couple games are all by Nintendo. And these ones are pretty interesting. They're all electromechanical. Nintendo, I don't think, has made a video game yet. It's all been these electromechanical shooting games. And
yeah, as far as I know.
This continues in that tradition. We've got Wild Gunman, Shooting Trainer, and a game called Fascination. And like I mentioned, they're all mechanical light gun games. I think Wild Gunman was pretty popular. I think it was more of like a Western shootout kind of deal. And the one that is the most interesting to talk about is probably Fascination, because this is a version of, I think, Wild Gunman or Shooting Trainer that was shown to only the press, not normal people. And it's a version where instead of like shooting a cowboy in the stomach, you're shooting clothes off of a woman until she's completely nude. So great job there, Nintendo.
Yeah, they're like, you know what's a good idea? People will love this.
They must have known because they didn't show it to the public. I think they were trying to
I wonder if
sell
they
it.
just got canned after they showed it to the press. Although, there's probably some people who'd be like, yeah, make it. But
I feel like it was one of those things they were trying to sell Wild Gunman or whatever. And they're like, look at this technology. We can do this with it.
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
I don't really know, though. It's pretty like, you don't find a lot of information on it. I'm surprised I found it. Just because nowadays Nintendo is like the family fun friendly.
Right. They probably buried that real deep.
Yeah, but they made it, and I'm going to talk about it. So can't get away from me, Nintendo.
Yeah, just bring on a challenge with Nintendo. We definitely got them beat.
Yep.
And so next up, we have one called Electrofun 401, which is a fantastic name by Electromotion Incorporated. And also Video Action by URL, both in the summer of 1974. And these just were single machines that played multiple different Pong games, like Pong doubles, hockey, and soccer clones. But other than that, we don't have too much information on what else they had.
Yeah, the interesting one about these two is actually the Video Action by URL, which I believe stands for Universal Research Laboratory.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, I don't know, but they're kind of interesting because they're going to go on to make a home console. So it's going to be called the Video Action 2. So this is where the Video Action 1 comes from.
Good to know.
Yeah, that'll come out in 75. We'll talk about it more. But following on from that, we have a game by Sega. I feel like we haven't seen them in a little while, but it's always good to see them. This is a light gun game that I believe was electromechanical, but I can't really be sure because we don't have really much information on it. But this one, you would basically be shooting balloons coming across the screen, and the balloons would start really slow and slowly speed up as you got further into the game until you inevitably died or missed a certain amount or something. So
right.
another light gun game. They seem pretty popular in Japan with between them and Nintendo. So,
And then next up, we have Atari's next installation here, Grand Track 20, in August of '74. And this was just a 2-player version of Grand Track 10. It came on a cabinet that had 2 of the wheels actually mounted on it, and other than that, it was pretty much just a slightly different course.
yeah. I mean, I think it is. We should like give it a bit of props because I don't think there's been a 2-player racing game that was at the same time up until this point.
No, you're probably right. And also with the, I don't know if you'd call it peripherals or what, but with the controls that they have where you're actually using the wheel on the cabinet next to the other player.
Yeah. So that would probably be pretty cool. And it also had, like 2 acceleration pedals and brake pedals and 2 stick shifts. The cabinet looked like really bulky. And it's also, just like the other ones, both players are standing while doing this, which seems really weird, but...
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people would lose their balance or just be like gripping onto the wheel.
Yeah. But it looked pretty fun anyway. Unfortunately, I wanted to play that one as well, but there's no emulation for it, so...
Go figure.
I know. What are people doing with their time? So next up, we've got another Sega game. This also in '74. A lot of these games we don't have exact dates for, so I just put them in where I thought was most likely for them to be released. So on this one, Goal Kick is some sort of Pong variant. We only have a flyer for it, and the flyer's in Japanese, so I couldn't even translate it, but it did have a picture. And the picture was pretty interesting because it looked like Pong, but flipped 90 degrees. So people were playing on the top and bottom. Or it might have been like a handball type thing where the players are hitting up towards the top. And if the ball went past them and into the bottom of the screen, that's how they would lose a point. I'm not totally sure. But it's interesting to me because it's a vertical sort of variant. Where the ball's
maybe
moving north-south for the most part.
Since it's called Goal Kick, I wonder if it also just kind of be like a... soccer shootout kind of thing, where you're just like bottom person's always trying to hit the goal up top. I don't know.
Oh, that could be. I'm not sure. But again, I would have played it if we could, but couldn't play that one. But it's nice that they're doing something a little bit different from the light gun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we'll see more of them in the future.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So next up, we've got a couple weird Atari spin-offs that they made. I think we've already mentioned like Barrel Pong and stuff.
Yeah.
But this is another kind of weird direction. So basically, the guys over at Atari were like, man, we're selling all these games to arcades and to bars, but we need to open up some new markets. Where else can we put video games? I know, we can put them in the doctor's office. Everyone's just waiting around there to go to the doctor's. Obviously, they want to play a video game. Which, yeah, I mean, maybe.
yeah. That's I could see the thinking there, even if it is a little strange.
Yeah, so I guess they were marketing towards like kids, right? At these, children's doctor's offices, and they partnered with the people who made Snoopy, and they made Snoopy Pong, which was just Pong, but the cabinet had like a big plastic Snoopy laying on it. It looked like a Snoopy house,
Oh yeah, nice.
But then they lost the rights to Snoopy, but just kept selling the cabinet and called it Puppy Pong. And
Good
they
old
also,
Atari.
they also had a Dr. Pong, but I think that one was just Pong and some other type of cabinet. They're all just Pong. There's nothing interesting about these. It's just the game Pong, but it's interesting how they tried to market it. I believe they were all pretty not successful, but
yeah,
collectors nowadays, if you find Snoopy Pong, I think it's worth quite a lot because it's a really old Pong version that has Snoopy on it. So kind of interesting, I guess. And then our final one for me for today is called Attack UFO by Taishio. This came out. Oh, dang it, Wes.
Sorry, I had to do it too. I was about to say Taishio too, and I'm like, wait a sec. We corrected this on one of those episodes.
We fixed this. Taito. And Taito's around for a while too. I'm gonna have to work this out in my head. Yeah, so Attack UFO, another one that sounds like amazing, but no emulation, no video. We just have flyers. So This one was a game where you controlled a rocket using a joystick and you tried to run it into UFOs. So it almost like a cat and a mouse game, but the other player was AI controlled and it looked like UFOs. So I mean, I think it would have been pretty cool, but I couldn't play it. So as is the case with the Lame Duck episode.
Yes, yeah. Can't play any of these. And so last one that we have for today is Twin Racer by Key Games and Track 20 by Atari. Note that it's different because it's not Grand Track 20, it's just Track 20.
Oh, yeah.
These were both in 74, most likely or definitely after the Grand Track 20 was released. And they're just Grand Track 20 clones, meaning that they were the two-player version of Grand Track 10, but they had different tracks, and like Ben was mentioning, the previous cabinet was like pretty huge, so this one had a slightly smaller cabinet.
Yeah, trying to fit it into like a decent space. And I think it also used a smaller like TV on the inside or whatever, so probably a little bit cheaper to purchase.
Right.
But yeah, it seems weird because this episode has basically been Atari makes Grand Track clones.
Right, yeah. It's every other game is like, by the way, Key Games and Atari made another racing game. That's the same racing game.
Yeah, and then there's also a bunch of Pong clones still, and a bunch of light gun games, which you can't play. So this episode is definitely one of the weirdest ones that we've gone through so far, I think. We've covered over 20 games, though, so...
Yeah, a lot of stuff covered, even if we couldn't play a lot of it. And depending on the game, it might be good that we couldn't play it. But
yeah, I will say next week will be very different because we're gonna get closer to the November holiday time period, and man, people come out with some great games around that period. So
oh yeah, got to make those holiday sales. They're saving their good games for that.
Yeah, so that 1974, the summer was definitely a bit of a lop, I think, but that will not be the case for any more time, really. I mean, we ended today in August, right? So we're basically there already.
Great. Yeah, well, it's sounding like an exciting one.
So yeah, just a quick wrap it up. As always, visit our website. I know it's not up to date, but I'm working on it.
I'm trying to work on it.
Yeah. Tweet us something, send us emails, any questions you may have. Check out the link in the description for the Golden Age Arcade Historian. That blog is like amazing. We learned a lot about the history of Ramtech and Exidy from it, and I think we only covered like parts 1 and 2 out of like 8.
Yeah.
So
only 2 installments that got us from Ramtech to Exidy, but then like didn't even touch like the majority of Exidy history, I don't think.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to be hitting them up again. It's a great resource. We use it for a lot of special topics, especially. So yeah, check that out. And Wes, you played with that Flim-Flam button.
I did play with that Flim-Flam button, and had a good time watching people play with the Flim-Flam button, which now I feel really uncomfortable saying out loud. But
yeah, Nintendo was having a good time watching you play with that.
Right. Good thing they only showed it to the press, though. Yikes.
And luckily, I don't think the press showed it to many people. I found it on this weird. I found it in this weird like Nintendo fan site. Like it wasn't on Nintendo's like official sites, or like we don't know what this is.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
I'm pretty positive it was a thing. So, yep, 20-something games. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We'll be back next week with a bunch of great games, but probably, well, I don't know. I don't know which one we're going to go with for the title.
Well, we'll have to see.
Wait.
Yeah.
Just have to wait for next week.
See which one defines it, stands out as the title.
It's going to be hard. I'll say that much. All right. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. See you guys in the next one.